If you have any questions, and obviously today's a panel session, so I suspect you'll have lots of questions, don't forget you can use at the bottom of your screen the chat box, and then you can either target that to everybody on the call or any individual presenter. As Simon will be the MC today, I'll basically keep an eye on the questions as they come in, if that's okay. Just let a few more people in. Okay, quite an interesting day today. In the words of Ian Jury, reasons to be cheerful, part 3. We have our Chancellor, who will be making a statement today after Prime Minister's question, PMQs. Around about 12:30, I believe this is due. And high on the agenda, obviously, is how he's going to address the inevitable reduction in the world of working, or as unemployment as we call it, particularly amongst young people. So there's a scheme that's coming into place, a £2 billion kickstart scheme to create more jobs for young people, which actually I think will have enormous benefits for all the agencies as well as some of the clients on the call today. There's also a conversation around a temporary stamp duty holiday, whether that means that it'll just defer the payment of the stamp duty or whether it actually means you won't have to pay an element of the stamp duty, I think is yet to be resolved. And in principle, I think the idea is the first £500,000 of all property sales could be free from tax, and obviously that will give a kickstart to the property market. At the same time as people looking for jobs, obviously at both ends of the scales there, I guess. Other interesting initiatives that I think are also due to be announced today are a voucher for up to £5,000 for energy saving home improvements. As you know, there's a long-term government target to reduce carbon footprint and emissions in general, and Brett, who's just coming onto the call at the moment, is actually doing a piece of work for one of our energy clients on that very thing. So nice little opportunity for that particular client. There's a pledge to provide 30,000 new traineeships for young people, £1.6 billion package of loans and grants for the arts and heritage sector, and then the doubling of frontline staff at job centres. So as we've seen in previous recessions, money's been poured into job centres as well as online to try and ensure that the distribution of opportunities for young people in particular is as fast and as quick as possible. So lots of, I think, some positive actions. Inevitably, as we get to the end of October, it's inevitable we will see an increase in unemployment, but hopefully some of these actions will help those people find jobs again quickly. And interestingly, the whole topic of today is very much about an industry that creates literally tens of thousands of jobs, not just in the manufacturing industry, but obviously in the service industries, and all the supply chain that support the automotive sector. And we felt it was an important enough category for us to have a deep dive into that sector. And we put together a really impressive lineup today. Simon's going to be our chair, which is fantastic. Looking forward to him leading the charge there. And I'll let him introduce his cohorts. So thank you, Simon, for hosting today's session. And I'm going to hand over to you now.
Thank you, Stephen. Welcome, everybody. I just want to introduce, to start with, our panel. As Stephen says, we've got a great panel on board, sort of combining retailer, manufacturer, brand, OEM, as they call it in the jargon, and then two agencies with a lot of experience within the industry. So just briefly to introduce them, we've got Philip Deacon, who's Head of Marketing for Marshall Motor Group. Philip has over 20 years marketing experience working in the automotive industry across multiple manufacturer brands. He's worked with Pendragon, Inchcape, Ridgeway, and now heads up marketing for Marshall Motor Group, one of the UK's largest motor dealer groups and winner of 20 digital industry accolades in the last 5 years. Marshall Motor Holdings is a top 10 motor dealer group operating 118 franchise dealerships and representing 23 manufacturing brands across 28 counties. Turnover for Marshalls is in excess of £2.3 billion per annum and accounts for over 83.5% of the brands sold in the UK. So they cover pretty much the whole marketplace in terms of the brands they represent. Emma Lowndes is an ex-automotive CMO in her 20 plus years in the sector, most recently with BMW and with Mini. Her roles have spanned strategy, sales, product management, multi-channel marketing, comms, service and parts sales, and electric mobility, so pretty much everything. Her career highlights include the accountability for the UK launch of the new Mini in 2001, and delivering the largest non-car programme in BMW Group's history, the sponsorship and activation of the London 2012 Olympic and Paralympic Games. Since leaving BMW, she's collaborated with marketing agencies to deliver winning strategies for other car brands like Lamborghini and in a number of other verticals. Next, we have Rob Mcgowan, who's Chief Strategy Officer at Edit. Rob has spent the last 20 years working with data and technology in the marketing space and is a firm believer that combining different, usually disparate disciplines together creates exciting opportunities for clients. His automotive experience includes customer insight projects for Porsche, customer experience work with Lexus, CRM with Mitsubishi, and full-scale data analytics technology and CRM work with Jaguar Land Rover. Edit is an insight-driven, data-led business that applies intelligent data to fuel transformational CRM and connected acquisition for some of the world's largest brands, including JLR, that we've already spoken about, Shell, Tesco, Sainsbury's, Peloton, and Vue. So it's got a really broad sector experience. Finally, but certainly not least, we have Mark Anand, who's MD of global customer experience agency Blueprint. Over the last 20 years, Blueprint has led the way with engaging and communicating across the automotive sector to help drive sales through improving customer experiences. Their clients include Jaguar Land Rover, McLaren, Aston Martin, Porsche, Lotus, and the VW Group. They have offices in London, Melbourne, and Los Angeles, where they help clients engage with customers at every stage of the buying journey. And if you want to find out more about Edit, or Blueprint, or indeed Emma Lowndes, please look them up on the Pimento portal or on their respective websites or LinkedIn profiles. Okay, so a bit of background in terms of the context of the auto industry. Now, everybody says picture paints 1,000 words, but I'm just going to use words, actually, and buck the trend. Okay, the auto industry is amongst the hardest hit by COVID-19, both manufacturing and retail across the world. In the UK, car production in April stood at just 197 units. That compares to 71,000 cars produced in April 2019, which just shows how much everything just stopped. Production started again during May, but in limited volumes and not at all factories, with some still to reopen. In 2019, 81% of the UK's 1 million plus cars produced were exported, so it's a huge export earner for the UK. And the industry employs 823,000 people directly and through suppliers to the industry. JLR, the biggest car company in the UK, has approached the UK government about the possibility of a loan of around £1 billion, or even the possibility of an equity stake to help them through these current times. Bentley has announced a 25% cut in staff, as has McLaren, both across its sports car and F1 business units, while Aston Martin has been in the press for all the wrong reasons well before COVID, is also in a world of pain right now. And these challenges are not confined to the UK. On the retail level, sales in the UK also stopped towards the end of March and were negligible during April and May as showrooms were closed and service operations were only there for emergency repairs only. Showrooms have been open since the 1st of June, but not all have. And while there is evidence of a strong return to retail demand, new car registrations in June were 35% below 2019 levels, making the year-to-date sales half that of last year. The new car sales market in the UK is typically some 2 million plus units, while the used car market is some 3 to 4 times larger, just to give you a sort of scale of the operation. The new car market is cyclical and peaked in 2015 at 2.6 million units, which was an all-time high. At the end of 2019, it was at 2.3 million units. The current prediction for full year 2020 is some 1.7 million units, a 26% decline, and that would make it the lowest market since 1992. In the financial crisis of 2008-2009, car sales saw a 17% peak to trough decline, but that was supported by a government-supported scrappage scheme that boosted demand by some 300,000 cars. And at the moment, a similar scheme currently looks unlikely for this year from the UK government. Now, the used car market is both larger, as I said, and more stable, as is the service and parts business. But the car retail market is very much a high-cost, volume-driven one, with typical retailer return on sales in the order of 1 to 2%, and that's in a good year. And 2020 is not going to be a good year for car retailers or manufacturers. Now, the car business can be a difficult one to navigate if you're not familiar with it. So for those who do know it, apologies. I'm just going to give a quick background for those who are new to the auto industry in terms of some of the ways that the business is different, or the way it measures itself is different from other sectors. Now, first off, there's a very big mix of different business operations that occur within a single retailer. You have new car sales, used car sales, parts sales, service and labour sales, finance, insurance and other regulated products, plus B2C and B2B, all operating under one roof, which can make it quite complex. And sales are also usually reported in unit terms, not value, and registrations are often used as a proxy for sales, rather than actual cash cross the door. The business-to-business market represents around 50% of new car sales volume, but almost none of the used car market. And most manufacturers operate a selective distribution wholesale model with independent franchised retailers who are free to set their own retail prices. 90% of new retail sales are financed through a variety of lease, hire purchase and hybrid finance models such as PCPs. And the share of used cars bought on finance is also growing strongly. Manufacturer-owned finance companies dominate. So in essence, manufacturers sell most new cars that they sell back to themselves. Sales bonuses and retail offers funded by the manufacturer often lower transaction prices well below the wholesale price paid by the retailer for a car. And much of this additional discount is now in the form of discounted finance offers and deposit allowances to encourage consumers to take the finance option. The mobile phone model of cost per month and cost to change is now the prime new car market driver. And the shift to fixed-term lease models has made CRM and data management far more important in the sector. And there are now sophisticated algorithms that identify the best moment to recontact drivers with personalised offers to upgrade or change their car. The independent franchise retail model creates complexity in the area of data ownership and management that's still really got to be resolved. Manufacturers and retailers are moving towards an omni-channel sales model as more consumers research and shortlist via the internet rather than visiting physical stores. Full e-commerce models are also being trialled, but they're not perfect by any means. This is partly in response to online intermediaries such as CarWow and CarBuyer, who are trying to monetize customers by capturing them early in their research phase and connecting them with the best deals and best dealers. Sophisticated finance brokers do a similar thing in the business-to-business market. Other intermediaries are also trying to challenge the current buying model, such as WeBuyAnyCar.com and Kazoo, while Amazon and eBay also have quite active auto sales divisions. While the complexity of the transaction makes full online sales more of a challenge, lockdown has definitely accelerated the drive to develop full e-commerce solutions. And the automotive measurable advertising spend in the sector has been declining in recent years, partly by the move online and into programmatic channels, but it's still a very significant channel and spend sector. Around 400 million is spent above the line in classic measurable, and when you add in PPC, paid social, digital display, plus retailer marketing spend, the total media spend for the sector is like about £700 million a year. Dynamic programmatic advertising, lead generation, digital integration with websites, chatbots and call centres is quite sophisticated in the sector. But as I mentioned before, there remains a gap between the theory and the actual customer experience delivery. The interface between online and offline and between manufacturers, brands and retailers remains a challenge to be successfully overcome. Another factor to be added into the current mix is the drive by government to move to end the sale of petrol and diesel powered cars by 2030. Currently, fully electric cars represent less than 1% of sales, but they are growing fast. And as we know, when you get exponential sales from recent experiences, things can move very quickly. And they more than doubled last year and still faster this, encouraged by new EU targets for average fleet CO2 emissions, and potentially some significant fines that could be imposed on manufacturers if these are not met. Growth in the sales of electric cars will continue at pace as many new models come to market and the range between recharges increases. New ownership models for these cars, including home infrastructure, charging and subscription-based products, are to be expected. So that's given you hopefully a very quick run through in terms of the importance of the industry, both from a manufacturing and retail point of view and an employment point of view, current performance, the impacts that COVID's had, plus some of the longer term changes that are going on in the marketplace and some of the vagaries about the market that make some of these changes difficult to enact. So let's now hear from our panel. We'll start first with a first-hand view of how business is today from Philip. So Philip, you've been open, or some of your, or all of your stores have been open again for just over a month. How's it been since you came back?
Well, what a last couple of 3 months it's been. I think we anticipated the lockdown period, so we made plans well ahead of that 23rd of March recommendation for lockdown of the government. We were actually the first big dealer group that announced the lockdown ahead of our competitors, really just with the safety of our colleagues and customers at the forefront of our plans. You know, we literally went from 4,200 colleagues to overnight less than 300 people left. So we closed on the 23rd. At the end of play on the 23rd, we closed around about 130 businesses. We then reopened 62 of our businesses on the 30th, so a week later, really in conjunction with the government's recommendations that we support key workers, the emergency services, vulnerable people, and also transportation sector. And that was a real big plus for us as a sector. I know your landscape, Simon, there gave lots of doom and gloom about the current market, but it's a sector that is extremely vibrant as well, and forward thinking, and we're very adaptable. And you know, from our point of view, it was great to see that we had around about 400 people returning to work a week later as technicians supporting, and the positivity around the industry during lockdown, albeit that we were temporarily closed, was fantastic. It was, the industry was almost as at one, the retail side. We were very supportive. The manufacturers supported us very, very well, because this was something that we couldn't plan for. And we got some wonderful advice. Not only we were all waiting on the government advice, but really great advice from our manufacturer partners. And, you know, we continue to work and make our business work. But during that period, we had to re-engineer literally our whole retail model. We went from a sales operation that would have circa 900 people down to less than 30 overnight. As a group, that worked really, really well for us. We continued to market throughout that period to say we're here to help. We had hundreds and hundreds of inbound messages about people worried about their finances, what they can do. So we became a bit of a guidance and advice line for our customer base, and we've got around about a million live customers. That was extremely difficult because we had reduced colleagues, and we saw huge uplifts in our Facebook messaging, inbound emails, and also live chat. They were all about messages of concern and what ifs and the what do I do. During that period, Marshall were one of the few big dealer groups that entered March really, really strongly. We were having an actual storming year, and that's been revealed in our announcements to the city. During lockdown, we actually managed to sell 3,700 vehicles, which was far higher than we anticipated. But that was against a backdrop of a target of 19,000. So there's a big gap where we can pat ourselves on the back that we managed to re-engineer and sell those vehicles. During the lockdown, we still had a big shortfall. So, like most businesses, we were hemorrhaging money. We took advantage of the government's furlough scheme, and we've obviously been at the mercy of government legislation and advice as we came out of lockdown. So our car showrooms are classed as non-essential retail, and our service centres. There was some service centres where we couldn't get people to work. We didn't force people to work, but we had strategic 62 sites that covered our geography and covered our brand mix. And like I said, it was very, very positive. We then opened all of our service centres on the 26th of May, and then we opened all of our sales locations on the 1st of June. And 5 weeks ago, we had 44% of our workforce back. We're now approaching 90% this week. So it's been really positive from our point of view. We've seen, since the 1st of June, like the sector, we've seen record inquiry levels. That demand that was there has been returned massively. We finished June 40% up year on year registrations. Week on week, this last week, our order take was up 48%, and this is with smaller teams as well. So the people that we've got back are working harder. There's a bigger demand on them, but also we're acutely aware that the demand is what is the demand? What really is it made up of? Because the 3 months finance holidays that were permitted by the finance companies, those people are now coming back in. Plus, we've got those 15,000 people that we didn't sell a car to that we were planning to. So we've got one of positivity. We're extremely positive. We're one of the. We've not announced any closures. We've not announced any redundancies. Where the sector is every day filled with those bad news stories. But we're extremely positive.
So is that demand, Philip, new and used? Is it sort of equal in terms of the new demand, or is it more one or the other against what you would have normally expect?
We try to have a mix of 2 used cars to every 1 new. That's our ideal scenario. It's a massive proportion of that are used. The new car model is we've got lack of availability. The manufacturer's sausage machine has stopped, so therefore it's got a lag. So we're running out of new car stock, like the rest of the industry is, as they re-engineer and reopen their factories. We've got a high proportion of German brands, and they started to reopen their factories towards the end of May. But to get up to production is one thing that will have a lag. The used car market is very, very buoyant. We are desperate for new stock, and that can only be generated by selling new cars to create used car stock as well.
So do you think that future new car volume might be hindered by supply more than a lack of demand? So for the balance of this year?
We'd like to think that the demand will carry on. the manufacturers, I know we'll probably touch on it a bit later, is the manufacturers still have new vehicles to launch, new electrification of their ranges that were planned this year. They're still going to happen. There might be a certain lag. The ambitions for the manufacturers still remain. So can we make up the shortfall? We're going to give it a good go. And, I think the industry, the supply will definitely be depressed, but will it return? I'm sure it will do.
Okay. And in terms of the marketing that you've done, obviously in the time when the businesses weren't open or were very marginally open, really just serving emergency requirements and key staff and key workers, what have you done differently now in terms of your marketing approach, or what did you do differently then that you're perhaps carrying on now into now you're back open, or were the things that you did during lockdown have stopped and have now gone back to a more natural marketing approach, or are there things that you've carried through?
Well, lockdown happened in the bumper month for the motor industry of March. That's when all of our marketing plans are coming to fruition. It's when we make the most registrations, and it couldn't have happened at a worse time. The last week of March is probably one of the busiest weeks in the motor industry, retail industry. So probably as a quick overview, it stopped very, very quickly as we knew what we were closing, because we didn't know how we were going to come out and re-engineer our businesses to be opened. We reduced our budgets in terms of PPC, but we kept a profile. We did more with brand and location and servicing and MOT, and maybe those keywords that probably wouldn't be, it wasn't as tactical. We pretty much removed the tactical aspect of our marketing. And 7 days later was the start of April, and all of retail marketing restarts again with new campaigns on the 1st of April. All the manufacturers came out of the blocks very, very quickly with strong offers. They tended to be based around 3-month payment holidays, or they were giving incentives relevant to the environment that we were experiencing. So that was really good from the manufacturers, that they put tactical offers which empathize with people's situations about being in lockdown. Like most companies, agencies, and even the manufacturers, all of my marketing team were furloughed. So it wasn't business as usual. We would come out of the blocks in April with customer campaigns, showroom events. There were some major launches like the Volkswagen Golf, probably one of the major vehicles that was due to be launched, the Land Rover Defender. Those were all paused. And now we're recommencing all of those. We have a very good social media community and a following, and we re-engineered our social strategy overnight, and we divided between Marshall at Home, which was all those stories about people keeping busy, and they were volunteering for the NHS, and then we then engineered part of it to Marshall at Work. And again, that was all about the positive PR stories that we are open and we're supporting the emergency services and key workers. And that carried on through. That pretty much curtailed when we came back to work. But again, I've been very, very conscious about, do we just go out with a tactical message? It's a softer message. It's all about, we've created a safer shopping experience. You can do contactless experience. You can do click and collect. You can do private appointments. It's about instilling confidence that they can do everything they did before, either from the comfort of their own home, or when they come in, we're going to make sure that they're looked after. You know, we've made massive investments in preparing our sites for social distancing. You know, it's probably with PPE and other procedures, we've invested around about £1 million on that whole procedure. And you know, that's been picked, that approach has been picked up by all the major news outlets, Sky, ITV, all the newspapers. We've had visits from the FT, the Independent, the Daily Mail, just turning up to check on the 1st of June that social distancing was prepared for. So we've used PR massively, but now we're coming back with applying tactical messages to generate leads, but with a primary message that we need to instill confidence that they can visit us safely.
Okay, good. Emma, can I bring you in there? I mean, that's obviously a very positive bit of information that Philip's given us in terms of the response by consumers and manufacturers and the retailers themselves to reopening, and it's really encouraging. With your experience from an OEM point of view, a manufacturer point of view, and probably you know, going back to your time during the financial crisis, how do you expect manufacturers and brands to respond to the current situation? Because they've had downturns before, as I said, it's a cyclical market. And from your insight, how do you think, from a brand point of view, they're tackling the current situation?
Okay, I'm going to answer that two ways. First way, I'm going to say what I think they will be doing now tactically, and Philip's already, you know, explained some of that activity. And then I'm going to explain from my point of view what I think they should be thinking about for the medium long term.
Good.
Because, you know, the really important thing to say at this point is COVID-19 has just exposed some challenges that have been underlying this sector for, I'd say, 20 years. Okay, so we're not even just at a tipping point, we're at an inflection point on a curve. Okay, there's everything to gain, but there's everything to lose, and there's winners and losers. Lovely to hear Philip talking so positively. I'm going to, you know, mix that up a little bit, but there are opportunities, and there are opportunities for marketing agencies, so I will talk about those. But first of all, what are manufacturers doing now? What are marketing departments doing now? First of all, if you know about national sales companies in the UK running sales and marketing operations, there'll be a cost stop. They'll be furloughing people, no expenditure unless it's signed off by the CEO, potentially even the headquarters board, which might be outside the country. Okay, everything will be scrutinised in terms of expenditure. They'll be looking at new products, maybe special editions, new price entry points, finance, you know, Philip talked about that, low rate finance, high deposits, putting some cash into the deal to stimulate demand. And they'll be maybe looking at moving their marketing more online, okay, because it's cheaper and it's more easily measurable. But I'd be challenging them to think, you know, you can't analyse your way out of this situation. You know, that's fine, but they're going to need guidance. And just flipping back to Philip, retailers know far more about car retailing than car manufacturers do. Okay, so you may be going to notice some differences in what I'm going to say, and there's upside in that for people later. Anyway, if I were an OEM now, in my opinion, I will be scrabbling for expertise that can help me make a step change in how I bring my cars to market. There are challenges for car manufacturers all through their value chain, all through their supply chain, okay, right from how they research and develop and invest and build technology into their car, all the way through to the factories, which are, you know, a lot of the cost of car manufacturing is tied up in the R&D and technical proficiency. Then you've got too many factories globally producing more cars than what are going to be needed going forward, all the way down through the supply chain till we actually get to the retailing part. and the dealers are at the pointy end of that, and that's what I'll talk about. If you want to know more about the rest of it, which all does have a very strong bearing, we can talk about that another time. But at the retail end, huge changes are afoot. On the challenging side, customers have gotten used over the last 3 months to, or before that, but especially now, they've been getting into the click and collect culture. Okay, we'd stopped going to 5 or 6 dealerships to shop around. In any case, you know, gosh, 10 years ago, customers were telling us that going to buy a car was like going to the dentist. You know, it's not a pleasant experience. I'm sorry, Philip, I'm sure you make it delightful. But if everyone can just think about what was the last interaction you had, whether it was fitting tyres, going for a service, buying a car, at what point did you feel like a king or a queen in that process, and that everything was happening for you in comparison to some other purchases or service purchases you might be doing? So in addition to that, you've got customers were being groomed into, you know, paying for a service, an ongoing service. So this is why you've got people like Jaguar Land Rover developing their Pivotal scheme, whereas instead of buying a car outright and sticking it on your drive, or, as Simon talked about earlier, taking out quite an expensive finance scheme, you can rent a car for as long as you need it. You know, Jaguar are doing get a new car every 6 months, take breaks, take holidays, but providing you keep giving us this payment, you know, we'll be very flexible. More of that kind of subscription-based ownership is what's coming down the line. And also, drivers are thinking, well, you know, I'm paying X per month for this great bit of metal that's worth about 50k or whatever, and it's sat on my drive, and I'm only driving it once a week to go and pick up my shopping, or I'm driving it 20 minutes to start my commute, spending 8 hours at work and driving 20 minutes back. What is that all about? So I think, you know, and I think in 10 years' time we'll look back and think we were freaking crazy. Okay, I've got quite extremist views, you will have gathered by now, but I think we will look back and think that was crazy. That the fact, you know, I can remember when we all wanted to own our cars, never mind, you know, finance was nasty. You know, we all wanted to have ownership of it. Well, we'll be moving to a new paradigm too. But there are opportunities. So while no one will be jumping into a car share opportunity recently, because that's unhygienic, rental, certain leases, mobility is an opportunity, but it needs some careful rethinking in how we and how manufacturers put cars in front of people and how they enable that. Simon talked about some inroads have been made to digitalizing the customer journey. There are some manufacturers doing, you know, pushing ahead on that. I remember 3 years ago, BMW online sales channel was larger than any dealer, okay? And it will have accelerated now. But there are actually, I would say, dealer networks who are doing better at this. So for example, Peter Vardy with Silver Bullet, you might know it, Philip. Mm-hmm. You know, that's providing automotive software for retailers to do a, you know, beginning to end wraparound service for retailers. And I think it's the retailers that are really stepping up on this front. I have a lot more to say about what that means OEMs manufacturers will be like in the future, but we'll stop there.
Yeah, I was going to say, well, that might be a good point to bring in Rob, who's got a lot of experience from the data side, because a lot of what you're talking about there touches on that point about management of data, both the brand and the retailer, and how that integrates. And Rob, you've done a lot in that space. What's your perspective about what best in class looks like currently within the sector within automotive, and what can it learn from some of your other clients as well, some of the other areas where you've got experience? You know, where are the gaps and where are the real strengths from the data management, and actually having that full end-to-end sort of data transparency of what customers are doing, thinking, and the flow of that data between brands, retailers, and so on?
Yeah, lots of questions in that statement,
Yeah,
so I'll try and keep them in my head and pick them off. So yeah, firstly, Philip, Emma, thanks for that. There's some interesting points in there. I think one of the most interesting kind of issues and things that we've encountered in the last few weeks, I think, has been something which you touched on, Emma, which was around the reprioritization of what is important. And all of a sudden, brands which perhaps had rested on their laurels a little bit are suddenly thinking, "Cripes, we really need to respond to the fact that behaviours are being changed and influenced by people being at home and being sat in front of 2D screens a lot of the time." So in the experience certainly that we've had with JLR and some of the other conversations we have, there is a lot more focus now on responding to that change of behaviour and investing more in the digital experience. And I think some of the interesting data points that we're starting to see come out of that are, and again, this touches on what you said, Emma, it's changed the perception and the experience that people have when they engaged with retailers. And when they go to buy a car, very few people probably do feel like a king or a queen. And interestingly, we are seeing, certainly on the work that we've done with JLR, a different demographic is engaging much more online than we're seeing in the dealerships. So there's a much bigger over-indexing of females who are engaging and kind of configuring their car online than we would ever see going into the retailers themselves. So I think one of the things that this industry and every industry has to do at the moment is try and filter out the signals from the noise, which does require kind of the joining of different disparate pots of data. And this is a real challenge for this sector specifically, because you have everybody who is very almost aggressively in some respects cautious of sharing the insight and the data that they have. You have the manufacturers who want to own the customer. You have the retailers who want to own the customer. You have, certainly in my experience, factions within both of those that want to own the customer. I know some of the potential things that we can do with the data and technology and the kind of the marketing output that we do as an agency. So much is possible, but so little gets done because it gets stuck at some sort of politics level between maybe a regional marketing team and a national marketing team, or an international marketing team, the different rules that we have there. So there's lots of things to navigate around there. I think learning from other industries so I've worked in data for 20 years now, and there's not been a client engagement I've had in the last decade where we haven't been able to add some sort of value from the existing data that people have and the existing technology that people have. It sounds like a broad brush statement, which is dangerously devoid of any kind of hard statistical evidence, but I can pretty much guarantee that everyone here who works in data and technology is not getting the most out of it. And there are a whole load of structural and cultural reasons for that. And I think the way to learn from it is to look at how, look at some of the rising stars of certain sectors, look at some of the startups that have changed their business models just to act differently. And I really do believe like there is a nugget of information in there around different demographics that are engaging online that we all have to recognise. And to get most value out of that, we need to be having the conversations at the right level to join up what needs to happen to take benefit from it. So I do think it's a really interesting time. I think there is from a marketing agency perspective, we're going to start, certainly ourselves as we work with data, we start to almost experience the adjacencies in marketing. So how can you use data to better predict demand? How can you use the data to better predict the sort of experience that you're going to have for retailers? So it's not for us anymore just about, I mean, we've always been typically a kind of a direct agency, you know, the messages that are going to and from you, Simon, as an individual. It's much more around how, as marketers, can we raise our status almost at the boardroom table by influencing price, influencing the demand curves, therefore influencing operations. It's really important that we kind of puff our chests out a little bit, I think, and say, look, we have that direct relationship with the consumer in most instances. So let's make sure that that information, the consumer's voice, does form part of that broader conversation. I've lost track of all of the other questions.
No, well, that's fine. I'll come back to a bit of that before the end. I'm conscious of the time. These sessions go very, very fast. Mark, I want to come to you, because Philip mentioned, obviously, since the site's reopened, they're back to physical interaction with consumers, against being virtual to a large extent during the lockdown period. You do a lot of experiential work within the sector. So how are you approaching and how are manufacturers and brands thinking about going back to delivering some experiential activity around automotive, which is obviously so much of the emotion around, for a lot of people, around owning cars, and within the current situation with that consumer, a whole sort of bandwidth of consumer concern around social distancing and sanitation and that sort of thing. How are you approaching that?
Well, I think it's an interesting challenge because, Emma talked about, 10 years ago, people were told that, it wasn't, you didn't feel like a king or a queen, going into a retailer and doing it. And so much of the work that we have done in the last decade or so, the last 5 years, has been about customer experience, has been about the theatricality of going into a service, about, them knowing your name, them having details, through the data that Rob does with, what your favorite coffee is, and making sure we put you in the right car as your service loaner, because the data tells us that might be your next best purchase. And what this has done has really clarified those things into the digital touch points. If you look at the blended retailing program that Volkswagen did probably 4 or 5 years ago, actually that has stead them incredibly good stead. All of the retailers who went through that, and the 15-point digital tools and everything that they had, which we helped develop, they've been really positive, and they've been able to pivot really easily to it. Whereas some of the other ones about, your new car is going to be under a cloth, and we're going to go into actually the small confined space where the lights are going to dim, and we're going to pull the cloth off to reveal your shiny new, car. And then we're going to go through a handover, and we're going to do a second handover a week later. Those physical close interactions, actually it's much harder to carry on business as usual from it. And it's really interesting hearing about, because Philip paints a very, positive and really nice to hear rosy picture, in terms of the demand that they've seen and as a retail end. And Emma's, talked more about the cost challenging that's happening at the moment. And certainly from an agency point of view, if I'm an agency right now, that is the day-to-day experience of it. And where, with Rob and, having that relationship with the customer puts, in really good stead, and that agency, because you need to be able to talk to your customers now more than ever. The reality is, at the moment, fundamentally, if you're an agency and you're working for an automotive or an OEM, you have to demonstratively be making the money or saving the money. And if you're not ticking one of those two boxes, you're likely to get dropped in the near future, because those are the only things people can demonstrate ROI on, and the only things manufacturers are looking at the moment. To answer your question about it, we've taken a policy that actually we are talking to our clients about new product launches, particularly new product launches at the moment, because we are in that cycle where we're getting ready actually for Q1, Q2 next year, and some of the big events and big activations need to be planned and booked now. In the very short term, we've seen bookings for driving activities reopen, and actually we think we're going to be oversubscribed very, very quickly for some of our brands with that. But we can manage that in a social distancing world. It's a car on a racetrack. We can cleanse it. We can give isolated times. There's lots of fresh air around. We can deal with that quite easily. But when it comes to how are you going to do centre launches, how are you going to be 300 people together into a centre with a canapé standing 1 inch apart, while they all crowd around and crane their necks to see the newest car, that is something that where we see a challenge. And our response has been that everything we respond to, not just in the automotive sector, actually, for lots of other clients, we're literally taking 3 proposals with every idea. We're taking a high social distancing, a medium social distancing, and a low social distancing scale of things. And no matter what the question is, we're going back with 3 answers, because there is a mixture of the OEM's position or the retailer's position on COVID and social distancing, everything that's in it. And then there is the individual who is your client's personal interpretation of where we are. So I have some clients and some OEMs who haven't furloughed anyone, haven't made anyone redundant, haven't experienced that, and that it's there's few and far between at the moment, who are like, no, it's business as usual. We plan to do this as usual. And I have another client who is the head of a national sales company who they haven't left their cupboard where they've been working from since lockdown, and they have no plans to. And their point of view is, the world has ended, the world has changed. Don't bring me anything that looks like it used to look. Only bring me stuff that's future facing. So you've got to manage, as an agency, you've got to manage the OEM and the retailer's official position, and you have to cater to your individual clients' perspective on. I had a conversation with not an automotive, an entertainment client the other day, and she literally used the words to me, I find the phrase "the new normal" offensive. I don't want the new normal, I want the old normal. Only bring me ideas that talk to the old. Now, the reality is, the safest thing agencies can do is present, here's the scale of things we can do, and here's how quickly we can pivot, and here's when your dates are that you have to make decisions to do it. Yeah, I think that the guy who's doing the illustration on this call has written the word adaptable in huge letters on that screen, which is fascinating. I'm loving that. But adaptable really is the key at the moment. You've got to be flexible. You've got to be adaptable, and you've got to have plan B, C, D, and E.
Yeah, but I think what's interesting there is that despite all the analytics and all the business planning and so on, that actually the emotional feel about how some of those individuals you're conversing with, your clients, can have as big an impact on their reaction to things as whatever the data says in terms of understanding that human interaction.
And whatever purchasing processes and departments and everything's been put in place, there's still the human factor. People buy from people, and you have to understand the person you're talking to and understand their wants, wishes, and fears in order to register your idea versus everyone else's and be speaking their language. And this is from an agency point of view, this is no different. It's just the next set of criteria we have to do.
Yeah.
It makes it harder because you can't actually meet these people face to face. You are doing pitches by phone to people you've never met before. And actually, as an agency, that's harder. Like, that is much harder to do than it ever was face to face.
So
we've got, yes, Rob.
Sorry, Simon.
Yes, go on, Rob.
I was just going to say that point around adaptability, I think, is interesting, because I don't think there's ever been a period where adaptability wasn't a requirement. I think we, as a society, we quite like to fetishize this idea of enormous change, whereas actually change is something that happens constantly. And but there are things which are truths which kind of follow through all of these points in change. And Mark, you just pointed on kind of one of the most important ones is around that human interaction, the people buy from people thing. That's true 100 years ago. It will be true 100 years from now, albeit there'll be different points and different levels of importance at different stages. And that's changed all the time. So while I do think it's an exciting, strange, I was going to say unprecedented, but that became uncool a while ago to say unprecedented. While it is one of those times at the moment, I think it's constant. Let's not get distracted by what's going on at the moment. Let's continue to work as an industry to adapt with each other and to innovate together to work our way through it. There will be another challenge, and we'll overcome it. And I think it's that mindset which will get us through it.
Right, very good. Right, we have 5 minutes. Stephen, have you got any questions? I think some have come in that we could perhaps pick up in the last few minutes.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, a few questions actually. One, first of all, for Phil. You spoke about sales success, particularly in June. What manufacturers, what brands do you see doing well, and which ones are doing less well?
We've got such a wide spread. We had certain successes in the lockdown period which have carried on. So some of our volume brands, such as Peugeot, did very, very well. The ones that did struggle were the ones that were struggling anyway. So like JLR, they were a difficult brand. There's changing consumer attitudes towards diesels, the changing attitudes towards electrification. So Volkswagen was very, very strong. Audi was very, very strong. We've got around about 30% of ours of Volkswagen Group. So it was the struggling brands were still struggling, and they're still struggling.
Yeah. It was a continuation, perhaps, of the trend that was there already, but it perhaps more evident in terms of when the noise and the fluff of the market goes and you're just down to the real core demand, it probably becomes more evident in terms of the strong brands.
Yeah, so Simon, in your previous roles, Mercedes-Benz is continuing to take market share. It's very, very strong. It's supported by very, very strong manufacturer campaigns. And then on the flip side, you've got Vauxhall, which is struggling anyway with registrations, changing product cycle, which also affects its demand as well. So we didn't really, and then used, people are not, there's been that period where people are not as brand loyal, so they may be considering the type of vehicle became more important to them. Was it a small utility vehicle, or was it a hybrid that influenced their decisions rather than the brand?
Yeah. Stephen, next one.
Yep. So next one was, do you see further consolidation in manufacturers? That's really, I guess, to Emma, and I guess, all of you actually.
Emma, do you want to pick that up? We've got a few minutes. I think Emma also had something, some other broader comments to make as well.
Yeah, Stephen, is it okay if I help marketing agencies understand what they could do for the auto sector?
Definitely, yeah.
In practical stuff, because in your shoes, change is coming. It'll be led by retailers, so Philip's end of things. I think it will be led by daily rental companies. I think Avis, Hertz are laying off people. Someone's applied for...
Well, VW are talking about buying Europe car.
Yeah. So a lot of change there. Daily, when was the last time you hired a car? Bloody awful experience. That's all up for reinvention and could play a very good role for mobility. That and leasing companies who are very vulnerable right now because of their business model, but they're poised. I think they're poised for growth as well. OEMs will become brands, but the delivery channels will become far more important. So what are the opportunities? You might have thought that listening to our conversation that there's a role for agencies to help auto manufacturers and their value chain get online. Okay, that it's about digitalization, it's about data, it's about the customer, and it is. However, there are going to be big changes coming if the industry knows what's good for it, and they will need help. The marketers in these organizations will need help with the creative expression of these new programs. Car manufacturing can look very similar, okay? It can look very, very, it's just a different car, it's a different car. Cars are gonna become less different with all the passenger safety legislation that's coming down the line and emissions regulations coming down the line. They will need an advert like the Cadbury's Smash advert. Okay, can you remember, the aliens laughing? Why did we ever peel potatoes, boil potatoes, mash potatoes to make mash? Why did we ever do that? You want Smash. We're going to need the car equivalent of that kind of work at a big traditional level, but also nurturing some good old-fashioned marketing, which is about engaging, persuading, and nurturing customers through the process to car use, whatever that is. It's less likely to be ownership, more likely to be something else. So if you can come up with a cogent argument to a manufacturer or to a retailer, that says, right, we can help you by providing this service, this marketing, we can deliver X, then they'll want to listen to you. What you shouldn't be doing right now is emailing with a list of your services. No one wants to buy service, but they want to buy output. There is opportunity out there, but get help to do it.
Brilliant. Thank you, Emma. We're just over time. There were some more questions which we will get answered and distribute with a follow-up to this. Thank you very much to my presenters. Really interesting discussion around a complex sector. Still plenty to explore. We didn't really get into where we are with e-commerce, but I think the broad summary from my point of view is, yes, like a lot of industries, automotive's been badly hit by COVID. What it's done is brought into high relief some of the other challenges that were underlying the market. Brands that were strong stay strong. Brands that were weak will weaken faster. Some of the pinch points in the current customer experience and the way you get product to consumers and the way consumers experience the brands and the product will need to change to meet changing customer behavior. And they're not, businesses aren't there yet. The retailers aren't there yet. The OEMs aren't there yet. The interface between those current entities aren't there yet. And it might need some more outside disruptors to come in to really shake it up, because they can move faster and quicker and not have the not encumbered with the infrastructure and the cost base that the existing model has. But it looks like demand's back. People love their cars still, which is good news. So thank you very much to my presenters. Thank you for everyone who attended, and we'll send a follow-up and address all the questions post this event. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Bye-bye.